All right, welcome everybody to our media training and publicity awareness campaign for the arts here in California. We're going to get started in a couple of minutes. We're just going to let people come in the room, as it were, the virtual room. Welcome, welcome. My name is Julie Baker. I'm the Executive Director of Californians for the Arts. Thank you for signing up to join us today for our media training. Really excited for this. We definitely see this has been a need in the community, in our sector. We want to make sure that we're raising our voices, particularly now in awareness of the impact of what's happening since COVID-19 to our sector, and making sure that our target audiences, including policymakers, as well as the general public, your local elected officials, the state elected officials, our federal elected officials, recognize what's happening for us and what our needs are in our communities, and what we're doing, what value we're bringing. So we'll just wait a couple more minutes. We had about 160 or so people sign up. We want to give everyone a couple more minutes to come in the room. If you would enter, that you're here today in the chat. Let everyone know that you're here. If you would say to all panelists and attendees, so everyone knows who you are and where you're coming from, if you want to include the land in which you're coming from as well, in terms of an Indigenous Native recognition. I'm coming from Nevada City, which is the land of the Nevada City Rancheria Nisenan, and they are actually right now fighting for federal recognition. We're working with them on that. I'm actually on the board of the local organization to support those efforts. If you want to include where you're coming from in there, we've also given you a link, so if you're unsure, you can look that up. And we'll get started in just a couple of minutes. Again, I'm just going to give some people a little bit more time to come in. I don't know about you guys, I'm sure everyone on this call does some webinars, maybe hosts webinars, but it's typically, in our experience, has been about 50 to 60% of people who sign up actually show up. So we'd expect about 70, 75, and there's about 45 so far. So we'll just give it a couple more minutes, see who's here today. Appreciate everyone who's writing in under the chat, where you're coming from, who you are. Maybe if you want to also add what you hope to learn today from today's webinar, so that we can make sure to either address those, or if not, we'll do more of these as we go along in the year. I'm going to put myself on mute for just 1 second because I can see my dog at the door, and I'm gonna, this is the beauty of all of us working from home. So hold on 1 sec and we'll just wait for a couple more people to come in the room. Again, enter in the chat where you're coming from, and we appreciate that. All right, well, I'm back, letting the dog in. This is the reality of working from home. Welcome, everyone. We're going to get started. My name is Julie Baker. I'm the Executive Director of Californians for the Arts. We're super glad you're here today for our media training and our arts awareness campaign. This has been a project that we've been working on in conjunction with my colleagues, Sarah Weber at Association of California Symphony Orchestras, or ACSO, my colleague Celeste DeWald from California Association of Museums, and my colleague Melanie Weir from California Presenters. We've been meeting on a weekly basis, talking about the need for a coordinated statewide awareness campaign for the arts. Out of that, we recognize that many of us may need a little bit more training on how to pitch our stories, how to write a proper press release, how to look at op-eds, how to get your voice on the radio, how to appropriately, if you get a chance to be interviewed, how to answer correctly. And so I went to a friend of mine who is an expert in all of these things, Gaynell Rogers. I'll be introducing her in just a second with a short bio, but I just wanted to give you an idea of kind of what we're trying to accomplish overall with this campaign. So as we know, for us in the arts, we've essentially been shut down. And I think that, sort of the word is the first to be closed, the last to reopen, right? The first to close, the last to reopen. And that's primarily for the performing arts and live events industries, although I think all of us are struggling with how to do our work within the constraints of COVID-19 and to keep people safe and to provide our services, our vital services that we offer for our communities. And so we're continuing to figure that out as we go, and we're an incredibly creative sector, and we've done a lot of amazing programs in the meantime. But what we've also know is that at the moment, we still have no guidelines for live events from the state. As the executive director of the statewide advocacy organization, we did 9 regional conversations in late August. One of the main things that we heard from everyone in the sector was, we need guidelines. We want to be able to produce some events. We want to be able to reopen, like some of our colleagues in museums have been able to do, except for in purple tier, which unfortunately so many of us are now in 41 counties. Like shopping malls, like religious and cultural ceremonies, like getting nail salons. Why are the arts eliminated from this process in terms of being a part of the reopening? And so we've been doing a lot of advocacy around that, speaking directly to the administration, to state public health. And then we've also, there's been a lawsuit in our sector as well from San Francisco Arts Festival, sued both the city of San Francisco and the state and Governor Newsom. And out of that, Governor Newsom actually said, no, we agree with you. You should be able to do something. So we're coming up with some guidelines. Well, we still haven't seen those guidelines. We do know they're in the works. But one of the other problems that we face as a sector is not only do we not have the guidelines, we also have audiences that have basically been told that we are super spreaders. There's a narrative around the arts is that we are the ones that are spreading COVID potentially if we gather, if we have events. However, in the studies that we've done, in the research that has been done in our sector, we know that we can actually put on events safely. That if there is an industry that knows how to do gatherings in a safe way, it is actually the live events arts industries. That's what we've been doing forever and ever and ever. And one of the things that we've been pitching essentially to the administration is, we are an underutilized workforce right now. You've sidelined this workforce that could actually be part of the solution. We're not the problem. We could be part of the solution to actually help change behavior in terms of public health needs, and to show people how to gather in a safe way. We could actually be the model for that. And I truly, truly believe that. And I think I know my colleagues do as well. And of course, safety is paramount. Getting through this pandemic is paramount. Getting us back to business is paramount. Bringing hope, joy, and a sense of belonging is what we do for a living. It is desperately needed right now. We have a mental health crisis. We know that we need to help people through this isolation. Regardless of all the mandates, people are going to find ways to gather. And we know that that's what's happening right now. Even our governor gathered at French Laundry. So what can we do? What can the arts do in service to public health? How can we be a part of the solution? This is what we've put together in a toolkit for you that's still in development. We'll have it available for you next week. And we offer to you that we would love for you to be a part of the media awareness campaign. What are you doing in your community to be part of the solution through this public health crisis, to provide services to your community, to get them through this sense of isolation and what the arts can bring in our sense of belonging and a sense of joy and hopefulness. And so we want to make sure that we make this message very, very clear, and that we do it in a coordinated fashion. So in our toolkit, we'll be offering you social media graphics, sample tweets where we can be tweeting your elected officials, as well as sample press release and some maybe even sample op-eds. So you'll be getting a lot of this in a toolkit. At the end, we'll be sharing with you a link to sign up to receive that toolkit, and we'll make sure that that gets done. So that kind of gives you a bit of an overview of what we're trying to accomplish And we hope that you'll join us in raising our voices for the arts, because if we're not going to do it, I can assure you no one else will. This is our time. We need to make this happen. We need to make sure that policymakers, people who are holding the resources and hold the ability to release resources, know about the arts sector, what we can be doing in service to as part of the solution. We're not just asking for a handout. We are here to help. So that's part of our pitch. And today, though, we want to focus on how do you make that pitch? How do you do that successfully? How do you get those 30 seconds, which I didn't do in 30 seconds? How do you make that pitch to the media? So here's what I'm going to now introduce our esteemed specialist, my good friend, Gaynell Rogers. Gaynell has enjoyed a storied career in media relations and mass communications in the arts, music, and film. She's a national influencer and communications expert who is an unparalleled source for media outlets across the globe, generating brand loyalty and national as well as international media attention for her clients. A noted media trainer, her history of past clients includes projects for many celebrities and causes, including 25 feature films and 26 music releases. Clients include Music for Literacy, the Polly Klaas Foundation for Missing Children, Zero Breast Cancer, as well as work at Skywalker, Lucasfilm, and Pixar. From the Golden Globes to Oscar award season to the Grammys, she has worked in performing arts, including dance, theater, and many music and special events for more than 25 years. She is also the founder of Treehouse Global Ventures, a fund for women, LGBTQ, and people of color. Rogers has been named Influence of the Year 2018 by Industry Power Women and the Top 100 Women of Weed by the Green Market Report. Working in the cannabis industry for 12 years as a 3-time cancer survivor. Gaynell has cultivated extensive networks in business, entertainment, cannabis, and investing, and is an active philanthropist at heart for social justice causes. She is married to 8-time Grammy Award nominated producer slide guitarist Roy Rogers, so she is very familiar with what it's like to be backstage, front of stage, side stage, promoting the artists, doing it all. So please welcome my friend and our trainer for today, Gaynell Rogers.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Julie, for that nice introduction, and congratulations for being a new grandma and also elected to the Board of Education. Super proud of you. This is really exciting. You're welcome. We have a lot to get through, so I wanted to start just, Jade, you can go to the first slide. Thank you. So this first slide, State of the Media, I want to talk from. There are 2 digital media databases that track and trace hundreds of thousands of journalists across the globe and this country. They're called Cision and Meltwater. They're expensive. Most arts and .org organizations don't have them. So we are pulling a list, a statewide list of influencers and art and culture and lifestyle writers throughout the state for Julie to disseminate in different regions of the state. But it's very important to note that the state of the media is noisy, as we all know, in these times. And I, as an arts advocate and someone who cares very much about the state of the arts, think that for a while I was thinking this isn't the moment to do this. And then I changed my mind because I think the arts can bring light and joy and hope to our culture. And I think if we do this right and together, it takes a village, we can really make a difference and ring some bells of policymakers to say exactly what Julie said, which we're part of the solution, not part of the problem. So as we go through this deck, I want you to think about who on your board, if you're in a youth orchestra, if you have writers or playwrights or dancers, who in your circle and your radar can actually become engaged in this campaign, because it's going to take a core of arts advocates to make this happen. So on this first slide, we are dealing with an environment of misinformation. We all know that. It's quite noisy. We also are having social networks bypass traditional media and frankly not doing a lot of fact checking. It's been a real problem. And then we've had a lot of staffing shortages. I don't even want to tell you the numbers of magazines, newspapers, and weeklies that we've lost in the last, not just during the pandemic, but in the last 2 to 3 years. So what you need to understand and what the authenticity that you will bring to the conversation is that the writers and journalists and editors and assignment editors that are left standing are there because they absolutely love their work and they're passionate about it. So we have to give them a lot of respect. And one of my mentors in media journalism was a woman named Queenie Taylor that worked with Bill Graham Presents up here for many years. And she always said, treat the local Advocate Weekly exactly like the New York Times. Give the media respect, and the media will respect you back. And they can hear that in your tone of voice. And we'll talk about this a little later in the deck. Next slide, please. So here's some tools to meet the challenge. Investigate. And what does that mean? So find out who owns the newspaper or the journal in your area, who owns the media outlet, and who is on their editorial board. This is very important because the editorial boards drive the editorial content. So do a little backstory on your media outlets, who owns them now, what's their editorial skews, and then do backstory on the journalists that you're targeting for whatever area of the arts you're in. Because of the short staffing, I have to tell you, I have heard that there are sports writers now doing, television reviews, and there's food writers doing book reviews. So a lot of these journalists are not just doing one beat, as they call it, they're doing several different arenas. So make sure you do your homework on the editorial platforms, skews, and also the reporters. So that, of course, naturally goes into pitching to the correct media outlet. That's a no-brainer. But the hardest part is demonstrating the relevancy of your news. So we'll talk about that more in depth along the way. But relevancy of the news cycle is very important, that you can tie your event, because everyone is having all these virtual events. It's very noisy right now. But why is your event, why does your event matter, and demonstrate the relevancy of that event? So we're going to emphasize safe opening. There's no better team of people across the state that can produce events safely and wisely and make people comfortable and inspired. That's true. And then we have to focus on content and what the innovation is of your organizations. And then you provide links to studies or academia or demonstrations of what you're saying in your story to the journalists, and saying, and this is why it matters, and this is how it affects the human spirit or the communities or our patrons or our community. Next slide. So this is a good one, asking for the news peg. So we've been around for 40 years. I've heard that so much. Well, that matters, but in these digital times that we live in, it doesn't matter as much as we hoped it would. So what we need to do is create a library or an archive that's staggered through time, that is content that grabs the media's attention and that is relevant. So what's new? Your formulation? Did you add a composer, an important dancer? Is there a board member that came from another location that's a new part of your community? Something that a new way to use your site. The San Francisco Ballet is doing a fabulous job of this, giving online classes to seniors, adults, teenagers, little kids. They're all over the board. So all of us don't have, big time budgets like these larger outlets do. But I have always told my clients to look at the models of things like the Met, the Kennedy Center, Gagosian Galleries, the Philly Philharmonic, San Francisco Ballet, MoMA. Look at what they're doing in their marketing materials, reaching out to their audiences, and you can model it for so much less dollars than what they have. But it's a good resource to inform yourself of what's actually reaching those very specific audiences. Okay, next slide. This is the big one. Social media. It's really difficult for the arts to have a loud voice in social media right now, in the times that we live in, with the pandemic and the election and the world spinning through this crazy time. So there are ways that you can use social media data in decision-making processes and have an influence. So one of the things we're looking at developing is a database of every communications officer for every policymaker in the state. Because if they're going to get your social media at the same time all your arts advocates do, and all the arts editors do, and all the assignment editors do, and all this is done in the same timing, that can become very, very effective. It's complicated, but timing and energizing social media is the most important thing. So You look at the news cycles and you kind of pick your moment. And that's not easy these days. The best time to reach out to the media for a news story is actually between 5 and 7 a.m. The assignment editors are collecting news of the day, and if you want to get into that widget to the editorial board meeting at 8:30, you have to get in early. So I always time my press releases or my emails to assignment editors, or I tell my clients to suss out with the assignment editors when's the best time that they want to receive a cultural or an art story. It may not be in the heavy morning news cycle. It might be at that moment, usually between 2 and 3:30, where they're trying to look for a more joyful, hopeful story to put at the end of the news cycle. If you notice, there's a lot of that going on right now. So pitch to the news cycle and try to do a related story. And then if you have a great community of like-minded brands and or arts organizations, it's good to engage them. Let's say you're a writers group in Los Angeles and everyone's struggling down there for sure. So let's just say that you go to guitar centers or gyms or yoga centers or health food brands that are in your area. We have a lot up here in Northern California that are very active in art social causes. And you partner with them and you say, this is an example of taking a village. So you say, okay, I'm just going to throw out some names. Our Amy's Foods and Cliff Bars or Kind Bars or eco-friendly cosmetics or eco-friendly beverages. You say, we're doing an arts advocacy program. We need to get in your social media circles. Here's the 3 treats we're doing on Friday at 12 o'clock to all these assignment editors and media people around the state. Will you also join this effort? And so it gives you power outside of the arts when you partner with like-minded companies in your community. So it's a real effective way. I know one manager in LA that's doing this for his music artists. He's launching everything virtually, and he has 40 to 62 companies, brands, or partners pushing that social media company at the same time, and then it just starts to roll. So partnering and collaboration is super important. Next slide. But here's how the media feels about this. This is a Cision, which did a study survey. They do a overview of the media, the state of the media of the United States every year. And so there's a lot of traditional journalists that are sitting in desks and TV, print, and radio media, and they still like to use Twitter a lot, but they're becoming kind of annoyed with it because it's going too fast. And because they're on deadline all the time, and sometimes they're working on one story and the assignment editor comes in and just says, oops, sorry, there was a bad accident on Highway 49. We're going to have to go cover it. So they follow it for news, but what they really want is trusted relationships. So if you have a good relationship with a local journalist, it can go a long way to other journalists in the region. And you want to make sure that you become basically the subject matter expert in your town or your community or your region. So they want to talk to you because I need a quote about this. Remember that the dancer that so tragically passed away from COVID at such a young age in New York. And the whole dance community of New York was so vocal about him and how wonderful he was and what a great community member he was. And it rolled into national news probably within 24 hours. So that kind of thing, that authenticity, and also just the value of what you bring to the journalist that starts to get trusted, then you start to get called on. That's simple. Next slide. So stating your case, why does your story matter to them? We're going to give you a sample of a press release, but I can't tell you that most of the reporters that I've worked with in California and nationwide say that 85% of the press release gets tossed in the trash because they don't give the first 5 W's in the first paragraph. The first 5 W's are who, what, where, when, and why. I'm going to say that again. Who, what, where, when, and why. And why is the most important thing? Why should it matter to the journalist, the TV station, the radio station, etc.? And they want to see that in the first paragraph. We don't do 2-page press releases anymore. One of the media studies says that most journalists, assignment editors, TV reporters, etc., don't get past the second paragraph. So you have to have real meat and potatoes in your first 2 paragraphs or it's not going to be read. They don't have time. So that's about building trust. You have to deliver concise information in a short period of time and say why it matters. And then be ready to, don't feed it all in at once. Be ready to hold back a little your substantiated links. If it's a link about brain health and music therapy, if it's a link about uh, music therapy and horses, whatever it is, make sure that you have a substantiation from an academic source or Pew or Brooks or people who do studies on these things. And then one smart thing that one of my mentors told me is I always started before my pitching to pretend like I was going to buy advertising, and I would call these people up and I'd go, I need to see your media kit, because the media kit I have a client that wants to advertise on ABC San Francisco. So I would comb through the media kit and make sure that I understood who they think their target audience is and for what programs, and look at their advertisers and look at that data. That data will tell you a lot about the audiences because they're very sensitive these days to audience reach and views. So study their advertising, folks, and you'll get a sense of who their actual audience is. And then their cultural audience is probably segmented out into lifestyle, not specific art segments, although I believe that data does exist. But you want to make sure that the assignment editor or the reporter or the managing editor or the deputy editor understands that you are interested in targeting their cultural lifestyle arts audience, and who are the reporters that have that line to that audience. Very important. Next slide, please. So here's just a few things. I don't have to read all the way through this. We covered some of it. But it's important that, again, that you target the outlet and the reporter for the specific news piece. In the philanthropic things that I've done for Music for Literacy or the missing children's issue or the breast cancer issue, I went to medical writers for medical things. For Polly Klaas and the missing children cases, that was investigative journalism because back then, that was 92 or 93. No one had really addressed, except for John Walsh, the issue of missing children in America. So we had to dig a little deeper into investigative journalists who would take on the issue. And nobody knew how actually wide it was. A catchy subject line is really important. These are really hard to write. I usually read a lot of journals or headlines of several newspapers before I write my actual subject line in an email. And by the way, there was a turn where reporters about 3 years ago were getting most of their stories off of Twitter. They're so overwhelmed by social media, now they're going back to emails. So the subject line should be super concise, jazzy, news breaking. If it's a news breaking type of, like a new talent, a new release, a new choreographer, a new board member, a new product, a new innovative intellectual property technology you're putting into your museum, that would be a science writer. So you have to target the newspaper and the writer as well as the reader. And it takes a bit of homework, but it's well worth it. And the last one on the slide is avoid too much jargon in your industry and avoid acronyms. I cannot tell you how many times a managing editor will go, I know nothing about her world, and she's talking in, acronyms that I don't even understand. So avoid too much preachiness, too much self-promotion, avoid the acronyms, and keep your writing sharp and concise. Next slide. This is a trust issue. So if you haven't taken a few minutes to understand what our department or publication covers, I'm likely to open your next email, or I'm unlikely to open your next email, actually. And this covers a lot of the same subject matter, but in the survey that Cision did at the end of 2019, this was 90% of the problem. People were pitching too wide in all these digital media lists they got, and it's super annoying. So once again, target, target, target. Next slide. So pitching for TV and radio. So the person that acts for radio and TV, there are managing editors and managing assignment editors, and they are the ones that actually assign the reporters. The reporters rarely, frankly, have a say in what they want to cover that day or that week or even that month. It is really the assignment editors and the editorial board that make that decision. So make sure that you're not going too wide and that you get friendly and cozy with your assignment editors and managing editors. This goes for newspapers, radio, or TV, and web platforms. So some of these folks have digital teams. In these times, those digital teams are thin. And some of these newspapers, like our local union, I'm surprised they have as much staff as they do. Here's the good news. The good news is cozying up to your local newspaper and radio stations is a wise thing to do because they are the ones left standing in all media reports I read at the end of 2019. Most communities love to read their community newspapers and their local radio stations. They depend on them, they trust them, and it's a good place to start. And also, they have relationships with your larger media outlets. So we're in Nevada County, we're in Nevada City, our larger media market is Sacramento. So we can nurture and feed relationships through our local media into the Sacramento market and into the San Francisco market and make a wider story for our region of the state. Again, be concise, speak confidently with a very, very sprinkle of excitement and engagement in your voice. I think tone of voice is really important. And do add a little bit of emergency to your message. If there is a fundraiser for someone on your board or a talent, let's say you're a theater and you have an actor that was lost to COVID-19 and you're going to have an emergency fundraiser for the family, that would be something that they would hang on to for the community to come around that family and support them. And there's a lot of that going on regionally and in small and large communities. So I think that a little bit of emergency to your vocal delivery, if it's appropriate, is great. But then on the other side of that, if there's something joyful and artistic and wonderful, and it's just going to bring so much warmness to people's heart in between these difficult times, I think those are stories that are being looked for now to end these broadcasts because people need hope. That's for sure. Next slide. This one always surprises people. Jade, is she going? There you go. How do we communicate? There is a gentleman at UCLA, Dr. Abram Rabinu, who studies human communication. And this is surprising, but this has been the case for a long time. In human communication, 7% of what is heard is spoken word, 38% is tone of voice, and 55% is body language. I know that sounds like astounding, but people get distracted. People are a little phonetic right now, but this has been the case for a long time. So the way that you speak, the way that you move, it's not the way that you look, it's your tone of voice. And this is proven in many media studies, and it's really important to remember, whether you're on the phone, but particularly if you're doing a TV interview. Next slide. So we'll go to TV interviews. So here are some of the things that I do in media training on camera with my clients and practice, practice, practice. These are positive facial expressions and negative facial expressions. And they can throw the viewer right off the screen. If you have a phonetic eye or raised eyebrows or whatever, these exciting Italian people that are always they're buoyant and they're very gregarious, and people are like, wow, that guy looks really fun. I trust him. But if you're kind of, well, I'm not sure, and you've got a frowned forehead and a nose crinkle and your eyelids are fluttering, that just doesn't build trust and confidence. So I always tell my new clients that haven't done a lot of TV, and I think a lot of you have done TV, but it's always good to practice in front of a family member or the mirror and practice, practice, practice. You get 50. So let's say you're doing a TV interview. They come into your facility, you're in the lobby of your museum, and it's a news piece about the state of the arts after this campaign starts to roll. So remember that it might be a 10-minute TV interview, but it may only be a minute and a half of editing. So when you practice the sound bites that you want the television interviewer to edit and say, I don't like the way I said that. I'm going to say that again because I can say it stronger. And that helps the producer, the cameraman, and the reporter figure out is like, she's more on the spot on that second delivery than the first delivery. So I've seen a lot of people do this in television interviews. Unfortunately, politicians don't get to do this as much as they'd like. But those of us in the arts that when something's being taped for later airing, they have the ability to edit your soundbite. You can actually direct the producer and the reporter to say, I didn't like the first part of that interview, but when I started to talk about the worth of our patrons and the amazing talent of our board of directors, that's when I was getting into the meat and potatoes. So you can direct the reporter and the producer in what you say. But here's some body language tips for you that are basic, but they really do work. Next slide. And in preparing for a pitch or interview, so it seems to me that what Julie was talking about, I don't know what we're going to call it yet, but we're forming an arts core of communicators that are all saying the same thing. That we're not just arts advocacy, that we can be the solution to what's going to be months and months and months before this country and the state gets back to any kind of new normal that we're going to walk into. So again, who you're following, the talent on your board, the circles of people that care about you and your work. It takes a village to form this mass, but it's really important that you form a core of people that know what you're up to and that they engage, whether they're just art patrons, they don't have to be on your board or on your staff, but in your circles. So it's really very important. And to pitch an interview and to relay true authenticity. Most of my most successful clients are preparers. They're like pretty nerdy. They sit and they write the script, they practice it, they memorize their talking points, they practice in the mirror, they record it on their phone. They make sure that they have all the talking points and messages within 2 minutes. It's super important and it takes a little practice and homework, but it's well worth it. And the more that you're prepared, the more effective you will be. And next slide, which is at the end. So what I want to say to all of you is this is a challenging time, but it is kind of an exciting time because I think in the arts, we have an opportunity to be innovative, joyful, hopeful, and we are the professionals that can open our venues and open our museums and theaters in a very safe, responsible way because that's who we are. We are event producers. We know how to do this. We know how to keep people safe. We know crowd control. We know how to do all these different elements of production. So even though this might seem a little daunting to some of you that are in smaller communities or have smaller organizations, all these rules apply to the same levels. It's about authenticity, it's about being prepared, and it's about bringing the light of the arts as a solution. The end.
Mel, thank you so much. If you could, Jada, if you could stop the share so we could actually see, I'd love to actually see each other in the screen, so that helps me. I really appreciated that. And it was interesting for me because I do a lot of interviews, it feels like, or have at times. And one of the things I think I saw at one point in one of your slides was don't over talk. And I actually have that problem. Where I get, and I think maybe it's a little out of nerves, where they'll ask me one question and then I'll kind of want to get every one of my talking points in and I'll go on and on and on and on. And then when the interview kind of finally comes out, I'm like, that's what they quoted? It's so frustrating. So talk to me a little bit about like, is that just the preparation part, or what is it that gets you to actually help to control what in the interview?
So when you get a media request, how to manage that is to say, how long are you going to interview me for? Who else are you talking to? How many other people are you talking to about this issue? And how much time will my edit be in the piece? Then you know.
Oh, wow. So you can be that straightforward about it.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. That's good information. I want to invite other people who are with us on the call to or on the webinar to ask some questions in the Q&A. It's not a meeting, it's a webinar, so unfortunately I can't see you, but please ask your questions now. Maybe you're curious about what is a good headline, what's a good catchy email subject line. I find what's really important for us to remember too in the arts is we are the experts. And one of the things that I've found particularly useful in pitching, not just to media, but also to our policymakers, is that, like, for example, GoBiz, who's the industry part that has that works on industry guidelines, which we've been really focused on trying to get for the arts, they called us this week. And they were asking us for advice, and that's because they now see us as the resource for the industry for reopening guidelines. That was a big, great next step in sort of the evolution of what we're trying to accomplish. So similarly, I think with media, it's like particularly local media, whatever it is, if there's an art story, you want to be the person that they're going to call, right? That you start to
Right.
build that trust and they know you in
Well,
that way.
you're trying to become the subject expert in your community and your state, all of you. So in order to become a subject expert, I've seen your talking points, Julie, that you're developing, and they're quite good. And what I would add to that toolkit is maybe an ABCs about a small community toolkit of what they would need to apply in regards to jobs and numbers in their community. So in larger media markets like LA and San Francisco and San Diego, it's a different thing. But in smaller communities, I saw that there was someone with playwrights in Santa Cruz on here. That has to be more targeted. And I'll tell you one of the ways. I mean, here's just an example. If I was head of a playwrights organization right now, which is I just can't imagine how difficult that must be. I would go to academia. I would go to the University of Santa Cruz. I would go to the journalism department and the theater department and say, could you work on this with me? I need concise messages for the Santa Cruz Journal. I need to get on the radio. I need some good bullet points and have a group of an art core of people to help you with your messages for your particular community. That's the kind of targeting I'm talking about. And I want to address the over talking thing again. That's what I have been consulting in the cannabis industry as a 3-time cancer survivor for 12 years. And one of the things that I noticed when I entered the cannabis industry is that it was before legalization, and it still isn't to a certain amount, a movement. So people would get on television and they just gush all this counterculture stuff, and it didn't work at all. And so what I had to do is like tamp them down. I said, I know you are very emotional about this, but you need not to be preachy because they won't air it. They will not air somebody that's preachy or over talks. They'll air somebody that's concise and that is an expert subject matter, and they have stats and data to back it up. And well, you do. I've seen your talking points.
Well, that's a great, well, we've got some questions in the Q&A, so I want to go to those. So the first one is a really good segue. And the question is for both of us, based on your experience, what are the top 3 talking points that all California arts organizations should be using during this time? So maybe I'll start first. And okay. I don't know if I have a top 3 because I'm not good at the brevity and the precise. I'm sort of the person who tends to ramble. But right now, our biggest talking point is that we can be a part of the solution. We are not the problem. And that is both a twofold narrative. One is both to the policymakers.
I'm going to stop you there. We'll do a little play on words here. So I would not say that first because you're not saying why. Why the arts matter is because of the human spirit and how it benefits communities. So we are part of the solution, not part of the problem. You see, you have to set that up because otherwise you're not saying why it matters. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I guess I was speaking to our crew of people who already know that. So I wasn't thinking I was pitching it that way. Right. But absolutely. Yes. I mean, but in terms of the issue right now, because the question is, what should we be using during this time? Everybody's asking for money, right? Because every industry is hurting right now. What I think that there is something unique that we actually have to offer in this moment in time, and we're actually being underutilized. as an industry. And that's one of our big points in our talking points, is that you should look to us to help bring joy to people, to teach them around behavioral change, wearing masks, social distancing. We can do this within our industries successfully and in a controlled environment, and give them an outlet, because everybody needs an outlet right now. So those are some of the things. We'll send also talking points along those lines. There's a whole also thing around artists are workers, artists are essential workers, artists are second responders. There's also a talking point thread around that as well.
Or you could have something like, here, artists for the soul, or the soul keepers, or the spirit keepers, or something that benefits health and communities, something that's so positive. So that's what I like about social justice causes, is because usually they're addressing a community that has a very soulful message. And so what the arts are about for me is community and spirit, and that goosebump thing that you get when you go to a music show or a beautiful dance concert or a symphony. So it's almost like you're doctors of the soul and the spirit. And so that has to be conveyed, not just essential workers. But the other thing I want to say is, because everybody has their hand out now for money and need, it would be better to be the spiritual, soulful side, and then saying, oh, by the way, do you know we have 700,000 arts workers in the state of California that are not working? Then you punch it in the back with a stat.
Awesome. I actually really like Doctors of the Soul and Spirit. I think that's a good one. And Karen, hopefully we've given you some answers to that, and there'll be more indirectly in our talking points, but obviously I need to get better at this. So that's why we're all doing this. Allison asked, could you speak to what to do after you send the press release, follow-up protocol? That's a good question.
Good question. It's all about timing. I've done this for so long. It's kind of like a gut thing, because I know my writers really well that I work with. But here's what I suggest. You send the press release. Let's say you send it at 7 a.m. At 8 a.m., you call the assignment desk. Did you get my press release in your email box? This is the Museum of XYZ in San Diego. Oh, you didn't see it? Oh, here's your personal email. Okay, I'll send it again. Send it again an hour later. Hey, Jim. This is Kathy from San Diego Museum. I'm just double checking. Oh, thank you so much. I don't want to be a pest, but then you just leave it alone. And then if they don't respond in a day that they assign your story, then you call them the next day. You stay on it, but you're super polite. This is what I call diplomatic pestering. You have to get some timing with the assignment editors of the print, and print's different than radio and TV because they're in a different deadline system. So most TV stations, for example, have to have everything edited and in the door between 2:30 and 3 o'clock in the afternoon for their 4, 5, 6, and 7 broadcasts. For print, the cycle used to be about 8 hours, but it's gotten a little longer for longer lead pieces because digital printing makes things happen so much faster. So it used to be like you'd have about 8 hours to make sure that you got that story assigned and in for the nighttime copy editors to do for the morning paper. That's actually quicker now. And then radio's kind of quirky right now. Radio's actually getting more popular because of all these different channels, but they still work at the same speed of light of TV. The morning managing editors come in at like 5 and they leave at 3, and they're responsible for that morning news cycle and the afternoon news cycle. The news assignment editors for the evening come in at 1. They pass the ball by 2. They're editing pieces. I mean, if you've ever sat in a newsroom and saw this, it's a blizzard every single day. It's crazy. But being a diplomatic pest, you can craft your own style with your own news outlets. But it's okay to be polite, leave voice. But I don't leave multiple voicemail messages. I put that person on speed dial until they pick up the phone. I don't think people listen. I don't think journalists and radio and TV assignment editors listen too much voicemail. They don't have time.
Got it. What is the average word count for a press release? You said 1 page. So is that pretty much the answer to that?
Yeah, it's usually, I would say, between 500 and 700 words.
Okay. And then Rachel asked, could you suggest ways to learn more about assignment editor, managing editor? How about owners and board, what they care about? Like, how do you go about doing that kind of research? What's the best mechanism for that?
Well, I do have access to these digital databases, so I can see who these people are and what they do and what they've done in the past. But if you don't have access to these digital databases, I go on their LinkedIn and I look at their past and I go, oh, Ann Smith, she went to Northwestern. Oh, I know one of her professors. I try to find some common ground on their LinkedIn, and I can say, "Hey, Ann, I saw that you write about music. I have a new release coming out. I see that you went to Northwestern. So did this artist. I think you'll have a lot in common." So you try to find some common ground with them, but you have to do backstory. You have to look at their Facebook, look at their Twitter, and all of their socials. Look at their LinkedIn, and kind of see if you can find some common ground on whatever you're pitching.
A lot of us write blogs, right? Because if we can't get our own press releases out necessarily and get them covered, you see a lot of medium posts, or hyperallergic now is really popular in the arts. What is the value of having sort of building that voice? Do media people look at those at all, or is it worth even sending those if you've
Didn't even
gotten that
come on
public?
it did not even come on the radar at the end of the year report. I have to say I was pretty surprised because the new thing is podcasts and short ones and short content. So we're starting to get a lot more data on podcasts. But the other thing is the attention span. I mean, people's attention span is just so thin. So I know a lot of people like to read, but but at the speed of light that we're working, I think a podcast is a good idea, and I think that it is also the content has to be under 15 minutes. And I'm seeing a lot of these music artists slice and dice their videos, so they're like between 1 minute and 30 seconds to 3 minutes max, and that when like the average, I did a study on a podcast that a client of mine launched a few months ago, and it was a brilliant podcast, but the average attendance was 10 to 12 minutes, and then they just moved on. So if you shorten your content a little bit, or you do your blog and it's one paragraph and then you have read more, and then if they're interested, they dig a little deeper. But shorter, concise, creative content is very popular right now because attention spans, just in the data that we're seeing, are just so slim. It's challenging.
It's so interesting because I think we see a lot of blogs and writing in the arts, particularly now, I think with a lot of people at home trying to process and figure things out. So I think that's really good feedback, is that, how do we work to get the attention? And maybe we need to be seeing more podcasts. And I'd be curious if anyone here is working on podcasts.
Also, let me say something about podcasts and your own social circles. Again, expand the village that you're communicating with outside of the arts, not just within it, because that's how word of mouth spreads about a campaign like this, if that makes sense.
There was a question about, can you say anything about ethnic and or foreign language press? How to reach
Mm,
them?
Well, in the LA market, there's just about every international outlet represented. I've worked with so many: Brazilian, Australian, NHK, Channel 6, Japan, Rai 1, Italy, Le Monde, France, Der Spiegel, Germany. They all have correspondents in LA. And those, I find that it's somewhat easier to get them to pick up the phone, especially Telemundo and Latin American outlets. They seem to be much more easier to reach than our outlets, not as saturated. So if you are working in that circle of people, it'd be good for you to dig deeper into those international outlets in LA because they spread across not only the state, but the country.
Interesting. Would you share, here's one, put you on the spot, share an example or two of a strong press release subject line for virtual event, if possible? I think someone's trying to get you to write their good subject line for virtual
Oh,
events. So
well,
kidding,
no.
Kathleen. Have you got a good strong press release subject line for a virtual event? Or other people who are on the call? Anyone else got creative people on the call, I'm sure.
Yeah. What I say is you want to have 4 to 7 words in a subject line. And so let me just think real quick. Well, here, I mean, I know this is an extraordinary example, but um, What's the
But yes,
drummer's name? What's the drummer's name of the Beatles? Just went right on my Ringo Starr.
Ringo Starr.
Ringo Starr raises $250,000 for Music Cares for his 80th birthday. There's a subject, virtual event. A Ringo Starr Music Cares virtual benefit. And then follow up with raise $250,000 for Music Cares. So yes, that's a celebrity name. But if it is somebody that's known in your community, then you can drive those fans and that artist. For example, my goddaughter's doing cultural programming for Gagosian, and she's doing this mix-up of cross-cultural conversations. So it's Kate Blanchett with a photographer. It's Malcolm Gladwell with a contemporary painter. So but it doesn't have to be famous people. It can be people that are noted in your community and who are loved, and put them together in a way that isn't expected. And that would be a really great cultural event that people would love.
Thank you. Here's a great question. I'm considering sending video releases in 2021. How effective do you think they are?
They're starting to be used quite a bit, and it's a very good point. Video components to any campaign is certainly part of the party right now, especially because of IG Live and Facebook Live. So I think that content, there's some really good content wizards across the state. I think the arts, particularly the graphic illustrators and people who have been in video production that are out of work right now because Hollywood has shut down so much production. So I think video can be very effective, but it has to be short. I would say 1.5 to 2 minutes max.
So you would attach a video to an email to a managing editor, and that's how you pitch your story versus a press release?
Yes, so you could say in the subject line, video for Matilda's dance company in Long Beach doing a pop-up in the parking lot of the football stadium at 4 p.m. this afternoon.
That's not 4 to 7 words.
Here's a clip. Here's a clip. Well, okay, like virtual pop-up dance company in the football stadium, or football stadium pop-up dance concert. Because this is happening in New York all over the place, my goddaughter says. I mean, they're doing pop-ups all over the place. You walk down Broadway and people are doing scenes on the street. So something that you could clip, like even 15 to 20 seconds, and say, video attached, pop-up dance, football stadium, something like that.
Or pop-up brings joy and mental health to your community, or whatever, something like, relating it to the health message as well.
Correct.
Oh, I got my somebody here oh well, okay. I'm gonna have to I've got someone with a okay. Richard, help! Okay, so
do you want me to mute? You want me, Jade, can you throw me another program? What the heck is that?
Okay, I think we got it covered. So sorry, somebody just came with a leaf blower. This is again working from home, my friend. This is the joy of how this goes, and we have to just go with the flow. I appreciate everyone here today.
Leaf blower, Rash's arts advocate.
There you go. There's our 5-word headline. I appreciate you joining us today, Gaynell. Thank you so much for being here. There's one more question in the box, and then we're going to wrap it up. As someone who is pitched constantly by agents, I know that the first few seconds have to grab me. If it looks too same old, I probably won't watch the same thing. That is Michael Alexander. I believe that's one of our board members. And I agree with you, Michael. And I think that learning how to do it quickly, often, Gaynell, you say you get like, what, 20 seconds, 30 seconds to make your pitch, right?
I would say 20 to 30 seconds.
So I think that the takeaway here today is like, we need to do our homework. We all need to practice. We need to work on our short delivery, particularly me. We need to work on brevity in our press releases and in our subject matters. We need to, as everything that we know about life, is we need to continue to develop relationships with the people that are writing the stories or determining the stories and becoming that resource that they know and love and trust within your community. And right now with the arts, what we're trying to accomplish with our colleagues here, California Association of Museums, Association of California Symphony Orchestras, and Cal Presenters, and Californians for the Arts, is really to work together as a community in the arts sector, in the arts and creative industries, to build our case making, to build our stories, to make sure that our stories are being told, that we're being amplified out there in the media as well, and influencing the public's perception right now in particular that we are not the super spreaders, but that actually we can be effectively helping to build public health messages and to bring people together in a safe way, and bring joy and bring health and bring happiness and a sense of belonging. So if you are interested in joining us in that, Jade Alicia is going to enter right now into the, thank you, such great timing, Jade Alicia, behind the scenes. Jade Alicia, our program associate, thank you so much for all your work. She just entered here in the chat a link to our arts awareness campaign. As you know, all of our organizations are pretty small, grassroots in many ways. We have a lobbyist on our CAA side, California Arts Advocates. I won't use acronyms, also learning that. You know, and California Association Museums has a lobbyist as well in their organization, and that's our direct lobbying efforts. But when we're talking about building public awareness, it really is going to take, as Gaynell was saying, and I think it was a Hillary Clinton quote, but maybe from an African proverb, which is, it takes a village, and it truly does. And so if you're interested in engaging in this process, working with us, submitting pitching stories, submitting op-eds, sending out video press releases, working with us on social media campaign, sign up in that link. You're not committing to anything at that point. You're just receiving a toolkit. We'll continue to engage with you. We're also going to ask for a call to action. If you're part of an organization that has a marketing team, or you're a marketing expert, we'd love to get a working group together. What we want to build is a statewide, coordinated, and consistent public awareness campaign for arts and creative industries, so that we can make sure that resources and allocations are put towards our industry when we need it the most. But at the same time, we know we can bring great benefit to our communities, and we need the investment to make that happen. So I thank you all for joining us today. I'm so very excited right now because I'm going to go visit my grandson for the very first time, mask on, right, with my Supreme masked on, and I get to visit. So I hope you all stay safe and well. Please reach out to us if you need any support, help in determining all of this. We're all in this together, and we will build this campaign, and we will build awareness for the great impact that we make, not only in our spirits, but in the economy and every aspect of our lives. So thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you, Gaynell, for the words of wisdom. I've learned a lot today. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.